It's Chavches Sivin. The year is Tavshin Pei Beis, or June 28th, the year 2022. It's the yard site of my grandfather, Menachem Mendel ben Shmuel, my paternal grandfather, and my Rabbi Zeichet Tzadik Kodesh Bracha, Rabbi Solzev ben Avram Tzvi Gustman. This was my grandfather Menachem Mendel. He went by the English name of Benjamin. He came to the United States in the turn of the century. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of his wedding invitation. If you notice, I can start out the wedding invitation. Mr. and Mrs. Goodman and Mr. and Mrs. Stern request the honor of the president of the marriage ceremony of their children, Sadie Goodman to Benny Stern. He went by the name of Benny. It seems to be that happened to be a name of his. It was in the year November 24th, 1907 at the Central Palace Hall on Sheriff Street in New York. It's amazing, RSVP, and this is a wedding invitation from 115 years ago. It's November 24th, 1907. If you notice, there's no psukim. There's a shayla about putting psukim on wedding invitations because to get thrown out. So notice there's no psukim. Now it's missing over here. It says over here Chasan Kala, and it's folded up. But this says Mem Nun Ches Mem Menachem. That was his name, and this was his wife's name was Sima. Samech Yud Mem Aleph, and they have Hebrew words said afterwards. More different things, but no psukim. And it says Mari Chasan Shmuel Stern and Eliezer Goodman. I'm by the name named after Eliezer Goodman. So it's fascinating that we do have a wedding invitation from the turn of the century. So he came to America at that time. He raised a family of Shomrei Torah mitzvahs with the exception of one child. He had 5 children, 1 girl and 4 boys. Only one of the boys is not religious, nor is his family religious. The other 4, including my father, Shalom Ashu, the Zeichet Tzadik Bracha, they were all from, now you're talking about people, look at the date, think about the history that went through those times, the recession, the World War I, World War II, the 6-day work week, and nonetheless, to remain from under those conditions, even though I knew very little about my grandfather, he's a quiet man. He smoked quite a bit. He smoked Pall Mall non-filter. Interesting enough, he did not die of cancer at the age of 85 in 1968. He died of a heart attack in 1968. So naturally, the fact that he was Shomrei Torah mitzvahs all the time speak again, despite the turbulent times, spoke volumes about him as a person, and Yehi Zichron Baruch. My Heilige Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael Zev Gustman Zatzal, it's a picture of him by Achnasa Sefer Torah. Right? He was born in 1908. He was younger than my grandfather. He was nifter 32 years ago at the age of 84. He was a Talmud Muvik of Shimon Shkop of Grodno. He was a chavrusa to the Mir Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Shalev, Zeichet Tzadik Kodesh Bracha, and he was a chavrusa or a tutor, according to Rabbi Shmuel Rozovsky Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovitz. So he was at some certain, if you know nothing about him, just chavrusas, you can go ahead and see. In addition, he wrote a sefer called Kunshei Shiurim, a bunch of his svarim, see his godless and Torah. But for myself personally, I was able to learn by him for 4 years, from the years of 1975 to 1978. Then in 78, anything I am today is because of the love and belief that the Rosh Yeshiva had in me. Yehi Zichron Baruch. Now, I've been saying the Daf Yomi shir since September 8th, 1993, or Chavches Elul Tavshin Nun Gimel. And the idea of recording my shir for posterity came about as the brainchild of my Bechor Yecheskel. He had told me about it, and I never thought I could do it. But it's interesting, as a result of the pandemic of the year 2020, that potential became a reality because of being sequestered and being able to say the shir publicly. Because of the medium called Zoom, I was saying this shir over my computer while sequestered in my house because of the deadly plague that was going out there. As a result, because of the Zoom, which began in the middle of Masechta Shabbos and continued on, I do not have Masechta Brachos, nor do I not have half of Masechta Shabbos. I have, starting that Samech Zayin Masechta Shabbos, right, do I have recorded. So I felt at the age of 68, why wait? until next cycle to begin recording. Who knows what's going to be? Hashem should give me the koyach. I should live and be well. I still have the siyata d'shmaya to go ahead and finish this undertaking to begin to be mashlim, the daf of Masechta Berachos and half of Masechta Shabbos. So without further ado, let's begin Masechta Berachos. We should have siyata d'shmaya in everything we do. Okay, we say every day, and we learn out that there's something called Kriya Shema, that go ahead and you say at the time when you get up, when you lie down, and when you get up, there's machlokes amoraim, if whether it's the Raisa or the Rabbanon. Anyway, so we begin the Masechta. And Emisai Karin Shema Ba'arvis. When exactly do you go ahead and begin the Kriya Shema of the evening? There's two Kriya Shmas, the one in the evening. At which time do we begin? Says the Gemara, we begin at the time with Kahanim Kamti de Truma, which is Teisak Echavim. Okay, a bit of Akdama over here, which is important for all of Shas, and certainly from Masechta Berachos. Kahanim who become Tomei. Kahanim who become Tomei, regular Tumah, right? And no matter what Tumah, they go ahead, they go to the mikvah, and they wait till nightfall. During that period of time, they called it full yom. Someone had gone to the mikvah during the day. That's the definition. Someone had gone to the mikvah during the day, and they're able to go ahead and eat their truma at night. Now, it could be that they are tamei for other things, but they'd be permitted for truma. For example, if they have a tumah that emanates from their body, let's say they're a tumas azov, which would require them to go ahead and wait 7 days after there's up and count and bring a carbon, then they're called what's called mechusa kippurim. They're missing their carbon, they're missing their kapara. So various tumas that emanate from the body, a mitzoira, a zov, right? These are people who have tumah that comes from their body. They would go ahead, a yoledes, they would go ahead and have to, in addition to go to purify themselves totally, it's not enough to go to the mikvah, they have to bring a carbon as well. So you might think that that the kohen can't eat truma until he's fully tahar, until he brings his carbon. Says no, that the kahanim that would go ahead and be toivo and be waiting, even though they didn't bring their carbon yet, if there's such a tumah, right? That's the time they eat truma. And that's tzesak kechafim. The Gemara is going to ask, why don't we state outright tzesak kechafim? So the beginning is tzesak kechafim from the time the kahanim go to eat the truma. At soifa shmur rishon, we have a machlokes tanoim exactly when it ends. Rabbi Eliezer says it ends at the end of the first watch, breaking up the machlokes the Gemara, but breaking up the night, 12 hours in a perfect day or a perfect night into 3 parts, consisting of 4 hours. If it began at 6 p.m., it would end at 4 hours into the day. That would be the end of when you're able to go ahead and recite Kriya Shema Shel Arbis. In the perfect day until 12 a.m. Which is machlokes, whether it's 72 or 90 minutes before Netzach Chama, before the sun appears, the first rays of the sun. So Rashi says this is speaking about the Kriya Shema, the Kriya Shema of Arvis that you say at night, right? Rashi says, in fact, this is speaking about the one that you say on your bed. Tosfos disagrees, right? But right now we're going to go with Shitas Rashi throughout our Masechta. So, there was an incident, Rabbi Gamliel said at there was an incident when the sons came from the Beis HaMishta from a party, and Amrulo, they said, like Karina Shema, we didn't learn Shema yet. And the Chari, it was late. He said he wanted to know if they still had time to learn Shema. So Amalahem said Rabbi Gamliel to them, if the morning star is not coming up, again between 72 and 90 minutes before Machlekes, Chayavim Atem Likros, you have to go ahead and learn Shema. Not only in Kriya Shema do we give the time of Alisa Shachar, Amru, El Kol Ma Shamru Chacham Mat Chatzos. Anytime the Chachamim say until Chatzos, mitzvasan at Shiyalim and Shachar. The mitzvah is until Amud Shachar. So, for example, Hekta Chalavim ve'Ivarim, the burning of the fats of Kabbanis and the limbs of Kabbanis, mitzvasan, the mitzvah is at Shiyalim Amud Shachar until Amud Shachar. In fact, there's a machlokes Rishonim over here if Chatzos applies. According to the Rambam in Perik Dalit from Ma'aser Kabbanis says, in fact, you are able to burn until Amud Shachar, but the Chacham said you have to do it till Chatzos. The Meiri, in fact, says the din is not the din of until Amud Hashach, until Chatzos, is not referring to the Chalav and Beivarim. Practically, the Kahanim would be able to go ahead and burn their Karbonis the whole evening. Where is it stated, the din of Chatzos? Any carbon that can be eaten for a day and a night, such as a carbon Osham or a carbon Chatos or a carbon Toida, you have really until Amud Hashach and Cain, if that's the case, why did the Chacham say until Chatzos? For the purpose of distancing a person from an Aveira. It's making a sayog. You can make a sayog, you should go ahead and in order not to come to be over this man of Yisr, they said at Chatzos, until Chatzos, even though you have longer. So we have three machloikas exactly. Everyone seems to say it begins with Seis like a Chafim, the time the Kahanim go ahead and go into based upon the Mishnah to eat their truma, and we have three machlokas when it ends. According to Rabbi Eliezer, till the first watch, which is 4 hours into the day. According to Chacham Chatzos, and according to Gamliel, Shachar, and Rabbi Gamliel says the Zman of Chatzos is only a harchaka, a distance, make a sayog, a fence around the Torah to ensure a person would not come to what? To an Issa. Further, a basic question. Tana hechikoi diktanim emasai. When you say me emasai karnish ma'aravis, you're taking it as a given that there is such a thing called Kriya Shema. Now, to say when do you start? First of all, how do I know there's such a thing called Kriya Shema? And straightens the second question. Tana hechi koi b'tani mei masai v'su ma'ishna d'tani ba'arvis bereisha. And why, in fact, did you learn Arvis first? So how do you know this thing called Kriya Shema? And how do you know you say Arvis first? It says we're listening to Shachas bereisha. Let's learn Ma'at Shachas first. And for the Gemara, Tana akra koi. This is why the Chiyuv of Kriya Shema we're going on what? On the pasuk. The pasuk says when you go ahead, when you lie down, and when you get up, and therefore that's the chiyuv of Kriya Shema. It's going on the pasuk. The chiyuv of shchiva that comes about as a result of b'shafal kamecha. When is that? It says the Mishnah when the Kohanim come and eat their truma. So that's the chiyuv. Ichsev b'shafal kamecha. B'achik tani. Zman Kriya Shema the shchiva emas on the word b'shafal kamecha. The zman of shchiva exactly when is that? So therefore, this really answers both questions. Since it says b'shafal v'kamecha and it says b'shafal first, it must be that what A, there's such a thing as what is Kriya Shema, and B, that the zman of we're learning Arvis b'shafal, and then we're learning v'kamecha, the tefillah of the Kriya Shema of Shachris. B by saying, how do you know the order? Not that you know there's a chiyuv Kriya Shema. Clearly, we know that from Shabbat Kamecha. How do you know the order? That first the evening, then the Shachris. Yolaf Bibri Shalom. We learn from the creation of the world. Siv Vayerev Yoker Yom Echad. Says there was Erev, first Erev, Vayivoker, then morning Yom Echad. So therefore, we go ahead and explain Erev first. Further Marakasha. If so, if you're explaining Erev first, Sefer Diktani, the Mishnah on Daf Yud Aleph that says B'Shacha. In the Kriya Shema Shal Shachris, Mevarach Shtein Lefanecha, you say two brachas before Kriya Shema, V'achas Lachrecha and one afterwards. Ube'erev, and in the evening, Mevarach Shtein Lefanecha, you say two before, Shtein Lachrecha and two afterwards. So now, since you told me that you're going to go ahead with Shachro Kamecha or Vayi Erev Boker, that you're going to mention the night first, why do we go ahead now and explain day first? Listening to Aris Bereisha, you should go ahead and explain night first. And for the Gemara, Tana Pasach Ba'arvis begins with Arvis, V'hadutani B'Shachris. Adukoi B'Shachris. So we began our Masechta with Arvis. Then we began explaining Shachris. And once we began saying Shachris, we stayed within the realm of Shachris. And Pirish Mili the Shachris, V'had the Pirish Mili the Arvis. So then, since we began with the Chiyuv of Kriya Shema of Arvis. So we began with the Chiyuv of Kriya Shema of Shachris. Then we mentioned that there's a Chiyuv of Brachis. And we mentioned the Chiyuv of Brachas Shachris, so we stayed there to discuss Shachris, and then we continued to go ahead and discuss Arvis. Amamar. Amamar always means, the master says, but it really means is to go over a part of the Baisa for analyzation. You mentioned it, I'm going to analyze it. It needs more explanation. That's what Amamar means. Amamar. So and you said, when exactly is the Zman that you begin Kriya Shema Shel Arvis? The time the Kahanim who would fully yoim, the time they come in to eat their truma. Michti Kahanim emas ka'achli truma. When exactly the Kahanim eat truma? And for the Gemara, Mishas Tzesak HaChavim. They eat at the time of Tzesak HaChavim. So listening, therefore, let's learn Mishas Tzesak HaChavim. Go ahead and learn Mishas Tzesak HaChavim. Why this obscure fact? No, it's we don't have Kahana eating Truma, but we do have Kriya Shema. We want to know when it starts. It starts at Tzesak HaChavim. We have calendars. We have ways of ascertaining the calendar exactly when Tzesak HaChavim starts. So why not list something that's practical rather than the abstract that we don't even know? Says the Mishnah is teaching me. It's teaching me two things. It's killing two birds with one stone. Right? What is that teaching me? Kahanim amos kachli b'truma. When the kahanim eat truma, mishas Tzesak HaChavim. At the time of Tzesak HaChavim. Now, this is important because again, getting back to the tumah that we will mark them earlier, if the kohen is a zav, for example, and therefore he's not going to get his full kapara to the next day, you might think that that he only eats truma after he brings his kapara the next day. Kamash Malon, our Mishnah, that no, he eats truma when Tzesak HaChavim, the night before, after Erev Shemesh of his tefillah that transpired during the day. That's the chiddush. Fred Kamash Malon, as I just spoke out, the kapara, the act of bringing the kapara, if he had been a zav, for example, loy ma'akva, there's not ma'akva from eating truma. Kiditanya, as the pasuk says in Emor, it says Ubo Hashemesh v'toher. And the sun sets for toher, and then the kohen is toher, and then he eats his kachim kilachmehu, which is truma. So the way we translate the pasuk, ubo Hashem, as the sun sets, this is the way Rashi learns. Tosfos says a different shot. We will stay with Rashi. Ubo Hashem, as the sun sets, the toher, and the mela. Now the kohen is toher to eat his truma for oichel min hakachim. Shimshei ma'akvas melecha b'truma. The bias shimshei, the setting of the sun, is ma'akim from eating truma. Ve'en kaparasai, but the bringing of his carbon, ve'en kaparasai ma'akvas melecha b'truma. But the bringing of his carbon is not ma'akiv. It does not stop him from being truma. So beautifully, we have that's the chiddush of saying you're telling me to eat Tzesak HaChavim from the night before rather than the next day or Yom HaShmini when they bring their carbon. Fred the Gemara. How do you know when we say Ubo Hashemesh in that pasuk in Emor? How do you know it means the setting of the sun? The high toher is toher yuma, and the day has passed. This is the way we're touching the pasuk. Ubo hakoyin and the Ubo Hashemesh, and the sun sets. And the sun sets the toher, and the day has passed. Right, and then Yochanan Kachim eats kachim. How do you know it means that on the days? Dilma perhaps. Bias oirehu. Maybe in fact it means what? It means that the coming of the sun on day 8, bias oiroi, meaning the bia of the sun on day 8, who umay v'toher is Tor Gavra. And Tor Gavra is speaking about not the day passing, but now the person himself is what is Tor. When would that be? After he brings his kapara. So therefore, the Gemara is asking exactly your chiddush is that the kohen eats. This is a din kol kula. A kohen eats truma b'tful yoyim. How do you know? Maybe he only eats what after he brings his kapara, and it's contingent upon the pasuk. I can translate the pasuk a different way. I don't have to say Bias Hashemesh means the setting of the sun. I can even say Bias Hashemesh means the coming of the sun. I don't want to say V'torah means the day pass. I can say V'torah means and after he brings his kavanas and his tar, then after. Not a mechusa kapara anymore, then he eats. So therefore, the Gemara is asking a universal question: how do you know the kohen eats full yom, eats the Erev Shemesh, and eats full yom? Maybe what? Maybe it's only after he's mechusa kapara and he brings his kapara. I said, Amar Rabbi Rav Shila says Rabbi Rav Shila in Cain. If that's the case, that if he only eats after he brings his kapara, lemakra the pasuk should say v'yitaher. You know, it's and he a lashon of a command, and he then becomes tahar. It doesn't say that. It says my v'toher. It's mashma something that happens by itself. Torah yuma, the passing of the day, is not contingent upon any action of any person. It's that day. The day passes, and their shine is good. Again, this is Rashi's pshat. Kedami inshi, as people say, erev shimsha, the sun sets, v'atre yuma, and the day has passed. Okay, very good. So now that's the way we dash in the pasuk. We have it clearly. Fa'alachali forever that what Tzesak HaChavim, that a full yoim koyin eats what truma. So really, just for the idea, when he goes to the mikvah, he's permitted to eat maisa. When he's tummy, he can't eat maisa. he can't eat Ma'aser Sheni. However, once he goes to the mikvah, he could eat Ma'aser Sheni. Once it's Herav Shemesh, he can go ahead and eat what? He can eat Truma. And once he brings his carbon, then he can eat Kachim. Once the no, it's if the Herav Shemesh is not mata him to eat Kachim, he can only eat Kachim after he brings his kapara. Mechusa Kippurim cannot eat Kachim until they bring the kapara. In Eretz Yisrael, which was the west of Babel, southwest of Babel, in Eretz Yisrael, they did not hear of the day of Rabbi of Shiloh, who darshan the pasuk that it doesn't say the yitaher lashon of command, but the tahar memela that the sun passed. And they asked this is Shiloh. When it says about Shemesh, doesn't mean the setting of the sun. My v'tahar tar yumahu, and the day is passed. Or perhaps bias ayrahu, meaning means the coming of the sun on day 8. Or my v'tahar tar gavra, when he brings his carbon. And they were poished and then Eretz Yisrael they were poished from a brisa, which we're going to mention soon. When they turn a brisa, simin ladava, the simin of the kohen that he eats his truma is when is tzesak echavim. Shmami no, then therefore if it's tzesak echavim, bia shemashahu, it must be the setting of the sun and not the rising of the sun. My v'toher tar yuma must be the day passing rather than the kohen bringing his carbon. So therefore, we conclude that segment of the first part of the Mishnah that we bring it that Kriya Shema is the time it says Chavim, and we digress to discuss exactly when Tzesak Chavim was vis-a-vis the Allah of Truma, and we have a beautiful pshat that's full yoim based upon the pasuk. Uba Hashemesh v'toher. Uba Hashemesh means the setting of the sun. V'toher means that the day is passed. And v'yochem and akotchim kilach mehu. The kohen eats from his what his lechem, which is what is. Now, I like to mention, since my son Yecheskel is the one whose idea was it, and he's named after Rav Abramsky, I'd like to go ahead and share with you a piece from the Chazon Yecheskel, Rav Abramsky Sefer on the Tosefta. So when it says over here, son, their truma. What's their truma mean? So be'emes, there is different types of truma. One is what's called trumas gevulin, the truma that they get from the gevul, from the boundaries, from the borders, which is what we're discussing now. And there's something called trumas lachmai that they get from the carbon toida. They get the trumas lechem of the separation of the carbon toida. The carbon toida is not their lechem; it's mishulchan gavoya. Hashem gives it to them. The truma is their money. They can be mekadosh nisha with it. It's their money. But the truma lechem is you get it only from what? You get that from Mishulchan Gavoya, you get that from the Mizbeach. And since you get it from the Mizbeach, it has a din of what of Kachim, Le'inyan carbon. The Mela, they would not be able to eat the Trumas Lechem that they get from the Lachmi Toida. They would bring different parts of the Toida besides the carbon. They would bring various Lachman. They would not be able to go ahead and eat from that until when they bring their carbon. So the Mishasha Kahanim Nechlasan Lechel Truma son, they eat by Tzesak Chavim. But the Trumas that's not theirs, the Truma that they get from the Mishulchan Gavoya, that Lachmei Toida, the one that accompanies the various wafers and lechem that accompanies carbon Toida, that they get Mishulchan Gavoya, in fact, that they would not eat Be'er Shemesh, that they would only eat after they bring their kapara. That they only bring after they beat their kapara. And despite the fact that in our Mishnah, no one argued on the beginning of when they're able to say Kriya Shema, right? In the Brisa, we have machlokes. The Brisa is, these were Tanoic statements that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi felt were bar, outside. The ones that he felt were halacha, the ones that he felt that were the correct girsa, those was what? That was the Mishnayos. The Brisa is lashon of bar, of outside. But again, the Brisa usually elaborates upon the Mishnah much more, and as the case right now, we'll have more elaboration. Amamar, again, Amamar always means to go over something that we mentioned previously in a brisa. Amamar mishosha kahanim mechtasan lechol b'trumasan, so it's mashmat tzesak echavim. Uriminu, I'll let you a stira. Amos like karin shamar ba'arvis mishaoni nichnas lechol pitay b'melech. The time when an ani comes to eat his bread and salt, you got that time. That is the time when you begin, not when the kahanim, but when the ani enters to eat salt. Ad shah sha'im liftar mitach sudasai. And what's the ending point? Not at Ashmur Rishayna like Rebbe Eliezer, not at Chatzos like the Chachamim, and not at She'alim Lashach like Rebbe Gamliel, but a much earlier time. So we have a starting point and an end point. The end point clearly argues. The sefer of the end point where he ends his meal, right? That clearly argues on the three opinions we just mentioned. But the Resha that says the time he begins to eat is pas melach. How do you know it argues on mishashakan mechlas echol mitrason milei mepligi amesteson loy ani v'kayin chad shiuruhu. In fact, the ani v'kayin can be the same shear. The time that kahanim could eat it truma at seisa kechavim is the time when the ani is nichlas lechol pitay, which is seisa kechav. Remenu, I'll show you that's not true. I'll show you that the ani and the kayin cannot be the same zman. Remenu, when do we begin reading Kriya Shema ba'arbis? The time when what? When people begin to eat their bread on Erev Shabbos. Now that's an earlier time than during the week. Since Shabbos, everything is muchan, everything is prepared what? Beforehand. So they begin an earlier time than the chayil. The Chachamim Maimim, Mishosha Kahanim Zachkoyin Lecha B'Shmasan, Seisa Kechavim. And similar numbers, Seisa Kechavim. This is the B'Marava that we quoted above, that they were placed at the Shaila, that they hadn't heard the words of Rabbi Rav Shila, how to touch up Pasuk Abba Shemesh V'Tayr. This is the Siman Lezecha, this is the Siman of Seisa Kechavim. Now, the Af B'Shem Ra'ila Dava, that the day ends by Seisa Kechavim, that the day ends, Shemesh V'Tar, that day ends, even though I have no Avaraya, Seichel Dav, I have a mentioning of it. And it's a pasuk in the Chemia describing by watching the Yerushalayim, Shnemar, by Nachto Oisim b'Malacha, we did Malacha, the Chetziam, and half of them, Machzikim Baramachim, they were holding on to the spears, Me Alois HaShachar, from Alois at Seisa Kechavim. So it's mashma, a day is from Alois until Seis. And so now you have a remez that what? That the day ends at Seis. The Oimer, and an additional pasuk, it says, Vayulanu halayla mishmar vayom malacha. The Laila was mishmar and the day was malacha. Now, anytime the Gemara brings the Oimer, it means that you could not see what you wanted to see clearly from the first pasuk. You needed a little addendum, you needed something else. So the question is, clearly the first pasuk said, May Alois until Tseis is the day. How do you know? What is this adding when it says, and we were what? Halayla was Mishmar, and what? And the Yom was Malacha. What is that? In other words, what is that avoiding that I wouldn't know from the first pasuk? What do I need the second pasuk for? The Chitema, when it says that we stood from Alois till Tseis, Michi Arva Shimsha Lailahu, the MS, the day ends when? The day ends with Shkia, with the setting of the sun, not the coming out of the stars, which is Tseis. The Inu the Mechashke, and they were Machshech. They went ahead what? And they went longer. So the day ended what? We want the day to end at Tseis. Their day really ends at Shkia. And when it says that it went from Alois to Tseis, the Mechashke, they were delayed longer. They stayed longer. So you have no raya that it's what? Tseis. Maybe it's Alois. Maybe it's Shkia. Umekadme, and they began earlier. Maybe it began earlier. Maybe says the Gemara. No. Tashma b'hayalonu alayla mishmar b'yoyim melacha. The day begins at that. It does not begin at Tseis. The day does not begin at Netz. The Tseis does not. The day does not end what at Shkia. The day begins at Alois, which is like 70 to 90 minutes before Tseis, before Netz, and it ends with Tseis. So therefore, the second pasuk tells us that was a complete day. There was no getting earlier or later. In other words, you might think that it goes from Nates until Shkia, Kamashma, and it goes the earliest Zman from Alois to the latest Zman of Tseis, and Tseis is when the Kahanim, and that's the Zman. Now again, we're leading up to a kasha. How do you know? You see that how do you know that they were the same time? How do you know that the Oni and the Kahanim were the same times? When an Oni went to eat his bread with his salt, and the Kahanim, we said that it must be the same time. We have a long-winded brisa, and we're going to ask a question soon. It says now Kesal Kedaitach, the Ani b'nei Adam, Chad Shiurahu. Kesal Kedaitach, that an Ani, when an Ani goes in to eat his bread, and when b'nei Adam go ahead to eat theirs on Erev Shabbos, right? Then, as the Kamash Milan, that the Ani is the same time as the b'nei Adam. V'yamin Ani v'koyin Chad Shiurahu. If you're going to tell me, we have three opinions. We have a Zman for the Ani, we have a Zman for the Kayin, and Zman for people. You're telling me that what? That the Havamina is that Bnei Adam and Ani at the same time. If that's the case, there's no machlokes. If you yamit Ani v'koyin chashiurhu, Chachamim hainu Reb Meir. Chacham who said from the time the Kohanim go in, and Reb Meir said from the time that people go to eat their bread, then there's no machlokes. If it's all if the Ani and the Kohanim, there's no machlokes. Yet when the Chachamim comment on the words of Reb Meir, must be it's machlokes. Alashmamina Ani shiur l'chud. Ani is one time. The koyin shiur l'chud, and therefore what? When we said earlier that the Mishnah, the end argues clearly that the words of Rabbi, the words we said earlier of the Brisa that said that we said that the time the Kahanim go in to eat people go in to eat their bread, and the sefer that at the end, and that argues, the sefer clearly argues in the three opinions. The ratio also argues in the three opinions that it's not the same time. The ani and the kohen are not the same time. It says no lie. Ani b'kohen chashiuru. In fact, it is. The ani b'nei adam lav chashiuru. Again, we have three variables. We had an ani, we had a person, regular person, and we had the kahanim. You wanted to suggest that the ani and the people at the same time, the kahanim are different, thus making a machlokes in the sefer above, even from the ratio. It says no. Ani kahanim are the same person, but the b'nei adam is a different time. Ani koyin chashiuru. How can you say an ani koyin or one share or a min or less you a stira? When do you begin to say Kriya Shema at night? From the time that you kiddush hayoim, this is bein hashmashos, the time where mesupik, what time it is. At that time, the kahana, that's when you say Kriya Shema. Again, from the time of bein hashmashos, when people go ahead and mag the Shabbos. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua Omer. At Seisa Kachavim, when the Kahanim are tar from eating truma, which is our Mishnah. Our Mishnah like Rabbi Yeshua. The time that toivel to eat the truma, which is what? Before Ben Hashmashas. So we have three opinions so far. We have the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Ben Hashmashas, we have the opinion of Chachamim of Seis, and we have the opinion of Rabbi before Ben Hashmashas, the earliest man. That's when you say Kriya Shema B'Arvis. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said they went to the mikveh during the day, right? They used to go to the mikveh during the day, so it can't be that so early. And therefore that's not Arvis. Rabbi Chananya says in the time that an ani goes in to eat pita b'melach, which is important for our discussion. Because again, you're going to say Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yeshua say the same thing. Most people go down to eat. If you're going to say that ani and koyin chashiura, Rabbi Chananya, who said earlier ani nechlas pitay, and Rabbi Yeshua said the kahanim matayirim are the same share, but obviously they must be different shiurim when we're giving different shiurim. Three people, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Meir, each one is giving their opinion. Obviously, Rabbi Chanina, who's speaking about Rabbi Chanana is speaking about people, regular people. Yeshua is speaking about kahanim. It must be they're speaking about what? About different times. So how can you say the ani and the kohen at the same time? Elolah shmamina, shiur the ani l'chud, v'shiur the kohen l'chud. Shmamina is a raya. So therefore, going back to the brisa we mentioned above, that it's a different einachinami. Not only does the sefer argue when it says that not only does the sefer argue, the sefer argue, the ratio also argues. Not only when we said the sefer that argues that we said above that the time that what the mishasha kind of close like chumasla and reminu v'yesov, right? V'yesov here sefer vadei pligi ratio name of pligi. Now we said ani the kohen is chat shiruhu. You see an ani and the kohen are not the same share. So therefore it argue, the ratio would argue as well. Says the Gemara. Let's conclude today. Which is the latest man? The ani is later than the kohen. The ani mukdim, if you can say the ani is earlier, Reb Chanina and Rebbe Eliezer. Reb Chanina would be the same as Rebbe Eliezer, would be Ben Hashmashas. Elolah shmamina, the ani mu'ucha, shmamina, it's a later time, shmamina, you have a very, very good raya. I thank everyone for listening.